We all have to deal with uncertainty, right? In any project, in any business, it's the thing that can keep you up at night. And the big question is always, how do we get a handle on it? Well, in this explainer, we're going to pull back the curtain on the formal process of risk assessment. We're going to show you how to take all that complex theory and boil it down into a simple, really powerful tool. Okay, let's get into it.
Think about it this way. If you were about to go on a huge cross-country road trip, you wouldn't just hop in the car and start driving, would you? Nah. You'd check the weather forecast, you'd look up the route to see if there's any major construction, maybe you'd even get your car checked out. That, in a nutshell, is risk assessment. It's not about being pessimistic. It's just smart, structured planning for the stuff you don't see coming.
So before we can even start to manage risk, we have to understand what it's actually made of. You know, it's easy to think of risk as this one big, scary cloud hanging over your head, but it's really just a few distinct parts. And once you can see those parts separately, the whole thing becomes way, way easier to deal with.
First up, you've got the threat. A threat is basically the what that could go wrong. The official NIST guide gives some great examples. It could be a deliberate cyber attack, like a phishing email. Or it could be something totally out of your control, like a storm knocking out the power. Heck, it could even be simple, unintentional human error. Next, we have vulnerability. Okay, so if the threat is the potential danger, the vulnerability is the open door it could walk right through. Think of it like an unlocked window in your house. In the tech world, this could be anything from software that hasn't been updated to a really weak password policy, or even just not having enough security training for your team.
Now we get to likelihood. This is where we have to put on our detective hats and ask, okay, how probable is it really that this specific threat is going to take advantage of that specific vulnerability? Is a phishing attack likely to work if your team has never been trained on what to look for? Probably. Is a server likely to fail if the hardware is brand new? Not so much. It's all about judging the odds.
And finally, there's impact. This is the so what part of the whole thing. If the bad thing actually happens, how much is it going to hurt? Impact is all about measuring the damage, the harm to your operations, your money, your reputation. It's the consequence when a risk stops being a what-if and becomes a reality.
So here's the key takeaway. Risk isn't just one of these things on its own. It's the combination of them. The standard way to figure out a risk score is super simple. You just multiply the likelihood of something happening by its potential impact. This little formula is the foundation for everything else we're going to talk about. All right, now that we have all the ingredients, how do we actually put them together? What's the recipe? Well, the good news is we don't have to invent it from scratch. There's an official, authoritative blueprint that the pros all over the world use. And that blueprint comes from the U.S. National Institute of Standards and Technology, or what everyone just calls NIST. Their guide on this, Special Publication 800-30, is pretty much the gold standard. I mean, it was originally developed for the U.S. government, but the principles are so solid that organizations of all shapes and sizes use it everywhere. The NIST framework breaks the whole process down into 4 really clear, logical stages. First, you prepare, then you conduct the assessment, then you communicate the results, and finally, you maintain it. What's so powerful about a formal process like this is that it forces you to be consistent. Everyone starts speaking the same language, which makes it way easier to compare different kinds of risks and to justify your decisions. And you'll notice that last step, maintain, that's because it's a cycle. It's not a one-and-done thing, because risk is always changing.
So, finding your risks is one thing, but what you do about them, now that's where the real strategy comes into play. And this isn't just a technical exercise for the IT department. It's a fundamental business decision.
And what's really interesting is how organizations make these calls. If you look at big international standards like ISO 27001, they talk about 2 key ideas. First is risk appetite. That's the big picture vibe. Like a tech startup might have a huge appetite for risk because they need to innovate fast. Then you have risk acceptance criteria. These are the specific, hard and fast rules. This is where you draw the line in the sand and say, for example, any risk with a calculated score of 15 or higher must be dealt with, no exceptions.
And honestly, this might be the most important takeaway of the whole explainer. The point of all this isn't to live in some fantasy world where there's zero risk. That's just not possible. The real goal is to understand your risks so well that you can make smart, informed decisions about which ones you're willing to live with, which ones you need to fix, and where you should spend your time and money.
Okay, so we've covered the theory, we've talked about the official frameworks. Now for the fun part. Let's see how all of this comes together in a simple, practical tool that, seriously, you could start using today. I just love this quote from a Reddit discussion. It's such a great reminder that the best tool is almost always the one people will actually use.
You don't need some fancy, expensive software to get started. Sometimes, the most powerful risk management tool in the world is just a well-organized spreadsheet.
And here it is in all its glory. This is a risk register. See how all those concepts we just defined are now just columns in a simple table? You've got your threat event, the vulnerability it takes advantage of, and then we score the likelihood and the impact, maybe on a scale of 1 to 5. You multiply those two numbers together, and boom, you've got a risk score. And that score instantly tells you where to focus. A score of 20 for a phishing attack? Yeah, that's probably something you need to deal with right now.
So, as we wrap this up, I want to leave you with a question to chew on. Thinking about your own work, or maybe even a personal project, what's one potential risk that this whole framework helps you see a little more clearly now? Because the moment you can actually name it, the moment you can write it down in a register like this, that's the moment you've already started to manage it. And that's the real power here, turning that vague sense of worry into a structured, manageable plan.